Phil Collins began his showbiz career as a teenager in the West End production of Oliver. Most child stars end up hopelessly asking for more, but Collins got two big helpings of musical fame. First as drummer and then lead singer in Genesis, before starting a solo career that included one of the most frequently played songs of modern times, In the Air Tonight. But Collins has also had to endure two very different profiles in the media. Originally pop's Mr. Nice Guy, patron saint of ordinary blokes, he's more recently been accused of blandness, tax exile, and ending a marriage by sending a fax. His recent third divorce brought more newspaper sneering.
A lot of people have your music in their head, have had for decades. Do you have them in your head? I mean, do they knock around there?
I suppose they come in and out, every now and again. But I mean, I've got my two young ones at the moment. They're just discovering what Dad does, So every morning, every school run, they say Daddy's music. So I put the iPod on, and it's like the live Genesis show, or it's the live My Last Solo Tour, and they're listening. And my 7-year-old will ask, "What's this about?" And I have to he picks up on lines. Well, what does that mean then? If that's what it's about, what does that mean? And Matthew's only 3. He'll hear a new song and he'll say, "Daddy, I love all your songs." So, thinking of training him to be a critic. But
I was going to say, it's like having two little critics in the back of the car.
Yeah.
People have various reasons for leaving Britain. Often in the 60s and 70s, it was tax. Other people go for weather or love. But yours was love, was it?
Oh, without a doubt, yeah. And of course, everyone always jumps to the obvious conclusion, and that's.
Because everyone assumes you're a tax exile.
I went because I met Oriane and basically moved there. I mean, within months, I moved there. My previous marriage was already faltering, and apart from being there for this, this personal reason, I actually loved the place. Everywhere, like Geneva, which is where I was based, kind of that area, life revolved around the lake, the water. I was brought up on the Thames. My mum and dad, all my brothers, sisters, all our friends had motorboats, and we lived on the water, And I found going to Switzerland where I did actually think it was like the England of the Ealing comedies. It was people actually walked past each other and said, "Bonjour, monsieur, dame." And you never met them before, and like you walk into a restaurant and everyone would say, "Bonsoir." And it was lovely, and you could leave your car unlocked, and there was no graffiti anywhere. So for me, it was a perfect place.
But this assumption that you're a Tory, because I told a music writer that I was interviewing you today, and he said, "Oh, has he come to England to see Lady Thatcher?" This idea that you were somehow so part of. But what does this come from? This comes because you're very rich.
Yeah, it's strange.
And they
isn't
think
it?
you're a tax
It's strange,
exile.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, yes. I mean, I think where it started from. My father was Conservative, but it wasn't quite the same, I don't think, when he was alive. Politics never loomed large in our family anyway. We lived in a semi-detached house in Hounslow. I mean, he worked in the city, got the same train every day back. So I think the politics of the country were very different then. But I said once, just purely without having any political reasons for saying it, I just said, if somebody gives you £100 and then takes £60 back, leaving you with less than half, I think that's not right to me. So I said, and if that happened, and someone said, well, what would you do if that happened? Would you leave the country? And I said, well, maybe I would. Maybe I would if that happened, And of course that was printed, which kind of suddenly the cement set in this rumour that I was a Conservative. And I just saw the common sense behind it. If someone gives you this and takes that back, well, at least 50-50. I give some incentive to work and sort of stay. So
well, it's 40% now, isn't it? Top rate. I mean, it has been for 10 years or so.
I don't know.
But you've never been tempted back.
Well, I didn't leave for those reasons. That's the thing. I mean, I left because I fell in love, and then got married and had 2 children who now live there. So why would I come back? You know, there's my mother's here and my brother's and his family and my sister and her family. I do come back, you know, but I don't, to come back and live, well, my kids are over there. I mean, that's, you know, I'm already trying to sort that problem out, you know, so I wouldn't come back. And if I've got enough money for people to tax me on it, I've still got enough money left, you know. So my attitude has never been, my life has never been revolved around money. I've loved what I've done, and fortunately, as it happens, people have been shoveling money in the bucket behind me. But I've never really done anything, you know, from a financially motivated point of view.
The other way some people have tried to read it going to Switzerland is that you were disgusted with England. You felt you weren't appreciated here, because round about the mid-90s, there was a change in the way you were written about here, particularly.
Well, that was all tied in with some of these,
Faxgate.
yes, these untruths, you know. I mean, what happened was I was split with my second wife. What happened was we had discussed this, her and I had discussed this, and she wanted me to write down, because it was a lot for her to take in, and she wanted me to write down what was going on and what I felt and what, you know, how we were going to go forward with this. So I sent her something, or I sent her a letter, actually, because I was away on tour, but we had discussed this over the phone, we discussed this face to face, but then I have to go away, and of course life, you have to deal with whatever you are dealing with along the road, you know. So, and then I remember distinctly that there was, in Frankfurt, in Germany, I was playing. I was just about half an hour from going on stage, and I was trying to call to arrange to meet Lily, you know, our daughter, and just to make arrangements for when I could come back and when I could have her for, you know, that weekend, or as long as, you know, whatever was available, if you like. And the phone kept going down. The phone kept going down. So I wrote a fax and sent it from my dressing room. And that was the one that turned up on the front page of The Sun. But at that point, it was too late. You know, I mean, I remember waking up in this hotel in Switzerland, and it was there. And I thought, how the fuck did that happen? I mean, not only literally how did it happen, but why? I mean, it's kind of, it's not true, but at that point, they were starting to carve on my headstone, he divorced his wife by fax. And it will be there now forever. And no matter how much I try to tell the true story, because the other story is better.
You've been in the papers again recently because you tried on the third occasion, as far as I could tell, to separate as quietly as possible, and then it seems as if somebody went through the accounts of your company and found the payment. But that...
Well, it actually isn't the payment. They just found a difference. You know, I mean, I think what it is that these, you know, you get these lists, the top 200 richest people. I think because all company accounts, it becomes public knowledge. I think that they kind of start compiling these lists when these accounts are lodged. So someone somewhere kind of was doing some maths and said, Phil Collins has dropped down from 156 or whatever to 189. That's not, and someone said, I not possibly. Did a Genesis tour last year, if anything, you know. Not that we made a lot of money on that, but I mean, the idea, the mentality is, well, it can't be. So, well, what's the difference? And they had this difference, this figure, and they made this wild leap of faith, thinking that was the divorce payment, and not thinking that I might have gone and bought a house, or this legendary house in Norfolk that I don't have, which keeps sort of bobbing up to the surface.
Oh, I keep reading that you have this house in Norfolk.
I don't have a house in Norfolk. I don't particularly like Norfolk. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, but why would I want to move there? You know, no, there's just...
That's a strange myth to have grown up. So where does that come from?
I have no idea. My nephew is also called Philip, and for a short while he lived in Norfolk, but he wasn't in a financial situation to buy a house. So I don't know where it came from. I mean, it's another Philip Collins that is basking in the publicity, I suppose, but it's not me.
But at any estimate, the marriages have cost you a lot in settlements. Were they worth it? Do you regret that?
Oh, no, I don't regret it, no. Well, like I say, I've never been motivated by money, you know. I mean, I know it sounds sort of... As someone with a load of money, talking to people maybe watching that haven't got a load of money, it kind of sounds, there's always the people that have got it that say, oh, it doesn't matter to me. But, I've never really thought about it. I mean, I've always been embarrassed, actually, by the amount of money that I've earned, because really I'm just doing what I want to do. I just do what I enjoy, and I've always done it all my life.
And the music business has changed so much, particularly in the last few years. I mean, the things that your generation took for granted of people buying music, releasing an album and deciding what the single would be, all of that is just going because of downloading.
Yeah,
gone.
Yeah.
Do you regret that?
Yeah, I mean, I regret it. The passing of the 12-inch artwork. I mean, I think that it all went downhill after that for me. I used to go out and buy records. To order Sgt. Pepper, or I'd order this or that. And you'd go down to your local record shop, and you'd hold the Holy Grail, and you'd go back and you'd listen to it, and you'd read the sleeve notes, and then of course the CD came in, and then everything's on one side, and I think that was a big change, apart from the sonic change, which everybody was talking about. It was all the music was on one side. So with an album, you had 5 songs maybe, and you had to have a good opener, you had to have a good closer, so that people would turn the record over, and then you had the good opener. So it was more of a work of...
So like a stage show, really, thinking,
yeah.
how to make them come back after the intro.
Exactly, yeah. And but with the CD, it just started at the beginning, and there was 11 songs one after the other, which is a lot. And I think what's happened as a result of that is that you get CDs by big, well-known artists that the best 3 or 4 songs are at the front, and because they know people will hardly ever get to the bottom of the pile, the quality kind of goes down. So in the end, people will download the tracks they want. So in a way, I think you can chart it. Little pointers have said, well, this is what happens. If you're going to put out so many records and that's the way it's going to be, we'll just buy the track, one by one, the tracks we know we like. So I think it's just different. I mean, it's different. I mean, the internet has, for all the good things, for the amazing things it's capable of, has also undermined, there are no little record shops. Well, there are, but there aren't as many as there used to be. They're more like for the connoisseurs,
The other big change is the way people get into it, because in your day it was answer an ad in Melody Maker, rattle around in a van, lucky, get played on the radio, Earl Grey whistle test, whatever. Now it's go on one of these talent shows, Simon Cowell, and you can be made very quickly. Is that a good way of finding musicians?
Well, no, I don't think it is. I mean, there's another few things that happen, downsides to those things where the people, and this is kind of, everybody knows this, but the Simon Cowells, and I was just reading about this today. The Sharon Osbourne, who I like Sharon, but nevertheless, it's the personalities. It's how much can you say that's nasty about this person? And of course the people go on it because, in a way, if he says something really nasty, you're almost as famous as you would be if he was saying something great, And now there's celebrity is this awful, encompasses, so many people that, got beaten in Big Brother, got voted out 3rd week, and now their personalities in OK Magazine. It's like, it becomes so, disjointed, so away from reality. And in some respects, it is a way of finding talent, but it's a very, kind of a strange way of doing it. It's not something that I kind of think is a great idea.
To talk about the way you got into it, going back into your childhood, you had one of those weird things on which people's lives hinged, that you were given the drum kit, your fifth, you were 5, Christmas. Now, a lot of kids, they get a drum kit and they play around a bit and they stop, but you somehow instantly, you knew that was what you wanted. You loved it.
Yeah, and that drum kit I loved, and I used to unbelievably sort of sit and play in the living room while everyone was watching television, which I think was probably only lasted a few weeks until I was told to go upstairs and play.
Was there a lot of shouting, keep it down in your house?
Yeah, there must have been. I mean, I can't imagine. I remember playing along to Sunday night at the London Palladium, thrashing away and everyone turning it up. But eventually I was told to go upstairs and play. And then I got a better drum kit, and I got a better drum kit. And it was something that was just, it never was a question. I kind of never wanted to be a policeman, never wanted to be an astronaut, never wanted to be a racing driver. It was just the drums, which is, again, one of the reasons why it was total, you're kidding me, when I had to go out front and sing. Because this is me, this is my turf, you know, this is what I've been doing all my life.
Although your dad wanted you to be a third-generation insurance broker, didn't he?
Yeah.
But
well,
never tempted.
No, my brother went to art school, and he's still a successful cartoonist now. And my sister was an ice skater, and she runs a theatrical agency now. But they went for a short while. I mean, my dad, and I found this out, you know, and that is what is wonderful. I think I've you know, you've constantly revisiting and finding out stories about your own family. That I live with this story that my father, who went on the same train for 40 years, actually liked doing it. You know, I thought that's what he liked doing. And my brother one day, we were sort of sitting around, and he said, because you know, Dad didn't want to, you know, he didn't want to do that. I said, well, what are you talking about? You know, he made you do it. He made Carol do it. He said, no. He actually wanted to he ran away to sea because he loved the water. And his father brought him back and said, this is what I do and this is what you'll do. So he was deprived of his moment, of his dream, if you like, brought back, and he was stuck in this job for 40 years. And I think, felt, whether it was out of bloody-mindedness or whatever, but sort of, this is what you're going to do. If I'm not having any fun, you're not going to have any fun. So my brother did it, my sister did it, and unfortunately I escaped.
Getting into theatre, the age of 14, Oliver, where had that come from?
Well, my mum got wind of a lady that was running a dancing school who wanted to start an agency, which is the thing at the time. You know, there was these stage schools springing up around London, and some of them are still there and some of them aren't. But she wanted someone to answer the phones to start the agency. And so my mum said, well, I'm not doing anything, I'll do it. So she started doing that from our house. And pretty soon, I mean, Oliver had opened in 1960, and this was early 64. She got this phone call about, can you send some boys down to audition for the Dodger, for Oliver, and for the cast of, you know, the boys group. Because, you know, they had quite regular changeover because of the rules at the time for education, GLC rules. And so I went, and I was at a grammar school, Chiswick County Grammar School, and I went and got called back, and it's a very humbling experience. I tell you, when you're standing on a stage with about 300 other kids, and they're all sitting cross-legged, and then one by one you have to stand up, go to the front, sing your song, you know, amongst coming from the back, you know, things like that. It's a very levelling experience. I mean, it's very, very strange. I suppose it's a bit like reality TV now. Yeah. But anyway, I got the job.
Your mother did get you into A Hard Day's Night, is that true?
Yeah, there was a call. This would have been the mid-late 63. A call for, you know, similar kind of thing. Can you send 50 kids down to the Scala Theatre in Charlotte Street where there's a film, you know? There was no other really sort of, nothing else was said other than just be there. So we went, and other drama schools around London sent 50 kids, and there ended up being about 200 or 300 kids in this theatre. I mean, when we arrived, there was a drum kit with the Beatles, you know, the famous logo on the stage, and I just thought, what is this? And this was like, I died and gone to heaven, you know. And then suddenly they all ran out, "Ga-ding, she loves you," and I just was, you know, this was just not anything I could actually understand. I was there watching this. You couldn't hear anything. And I was sort of shut up. I mean, they really wanted everybody to scream, which was the whole idea of the thing. And I was kind of trying to lean forward to hear what was going on. And then, you know, when the film came out, you know, we did a day's work, and that was the end of it. And sometimes when they were filming us, there was 4 stand-ins. But when the film came out, of course, I rushed out to see it anyway, because I was, you know, the Beatles were my heroes, still are, really. And I saw people I knew, I saw a girlfriend, a friend of mine, my best friend, but they certainly didn't think we must have that bloke in, you know. I was not doing what I was supposed to be doing.
These bands at school, the real thing, that was the first band, was it?
Yeah. Yeah, well, there was, around the time that we started playing thinking about forming a band, it was the mid-'60s, and there was Motown and Stax Atlantic, Sam and Dave, Otis Redding, all these fantastic bands. I used to go to the Marquee Club pretty much 3 or 4 times a week. And there's a couple of bands, one called The Action particularly, who've become great friends of mine, and that I worshipped. They did great versions of these songs, and I used to bring, along with the singer, Peter, we both used to go, and we brought back these songs to learn in the school band. And one song was called The Real Thing, and we just thought it was a cool name for a band, so it was that. And we had, I played drums, so there was a pair of brothers played guitar and bass, and Peter was the singer, and we had 2 backup vocalists who loomed large in my life.
Because you married one and
married one,
had an affair with the other.
Oh, you're so cruel, Mark. Yes, Andy was my first wife, yeah. I mean, I've known her since I was 13. And the other one was, she was very big in my life early, the school years. And in the end, yes, that was kind of part of what led to my second marriage, breaking up.
The first song you wrote, I believe, was called Lying, Crying, Dying. So you were into rhyme in a big way at that time.
You'd never tell, really. Yeah.
What kind of thing was it?
Well, I learned to play the piano. I'm trying to teach my kids to play the same way. Play one, miss one, play one, miss one, play one, So usually D minor, which is the saddest key of all, as you know. It'd be like that, and I kind of... to call it a song was we just happened to be in a band, me and a friend of mine, Ronnie Carroll, who's one of my oldest friends, actually. He still plays with me now. And we had something that was almost the right length, and it was a song, and we learnt it and played it. And we actually did a demo of it. It's probably circulating somewhere, but it's naff. It was rotten.
We now know Genesis. They'd been going through drummers at quite a rate before you. Did they tell you that?
No, I just knew the band was working a lot. It's that their name kept cropping up in the back pages of Melody Makers, playing here, playing there. I said, this is what I want to do. I want to play. So I was aware that their drummer had just jumped, ship. I think actually he was pushed. The guitar player left, Anthony Phillips, who was a very important writing member of the band, and they thought, well, if we're going to get another guitar player, let's clean ship and get another drummer as well. But they had a few before, yeah. Feeling that drummers were easy to come by, I guess. I
know it's been told often, the story of you auditioning for them and having prepared and so on, but the chemistry, what was their chemistry there from the beginning? My
impressions, first of all, was driving out to Chobham, which was a very leafy Surrey English countryside. I lived in Hounslow, which is, there's a tree over there, look, and so I drove out to this place with Ronnie, because he was auditioning for the guitar player part. And as we got close to the house, and it was Peter's parents' house, and Peter's parents were quite well off. And I was invited to go and have a swim while I was waiting, And it was all like different, I mean, I'd been in various bands, Cliff Charles Blues Band, where we've got spit and sawdust places. And here I was, I didn't know anything about this kind of part of life. So so they were strange at first, and then of course I got the job, and every now and again people would sort of suddenly storm off, and it was that someone had said something to somebody, and it was very highly strung, and that was kind of, I was trying to diffuse it without necessarily understanding what was going on. But it was a strange sort of band to be in. But
well, it clearly was. Nursery Crimes, again, it was this period of the concept album, wasn't it? Very big at the time.
Well, I think there's an overall feel. I mean, there wasn't really a concept. There was no thread running through it. I mean, the cover kind of had bits of songs, bits of the lyrics of the songs on the cover. So maybe it gave it an air of some kind of storytelling. but each song was very different. I mean, there was no. The Lamb Lies Down. That was after Nursery Rhyme was Foxtrot, which again was the first time we'd done a long piece on one side, 25 minutes, and then we took that to the next stage with The Lamb, which was a double album, concept album, with Peter writing the story, and which I mean, you can try and get Peter on his own to tell you what it's about, but no one really knows what it's about. It was just a lot of imagery and. But and
did you used to ask him? Do you used to say, "What's all this? What are you going on about? What's all
no,
this?"
I didn't. No, I didn't. I just played the music.
And what is now called prog rock, progressive rock? Was that a term in use at the time? Did you think of being part
Progressive
of the
rock? Yeah, it became prog rock, of course. But progressive rock was really, I guess, what it was. We were.
And what did it mean to you, progressive rock?
It meant things slightly outside the box of 4-chord songs, kind of thing that I do. But it was outside that box of the normal. There was tricky bits, there was different time signatures, there was lyrics you wouldn't find in many other places. I mean, alongside us at the time, and put in that prog rock box was, Yes, and Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and Jethro Tull, and Pink Floyd. Those bands particularly. There was others, but. And each of those bands are totally different in themselves, But we all got lumped together as being prog rock because they didn't know what else to call it. And I personally, wasn't a particularly fan of any of those other bands. I was a big fan of Yes in the early days, but once they started to go, into the lyrical underworld, I kind of lost them, frankly.
And Peter, not quite Freddie Mercury, but he was a very theatrical figure, wasn't he? And costumes. And all of that. I was talking to Roger Taylor the other day, the drummer in Queen, and they used to tease Freddie and giggle about him quite a lot. Did that go on with Peter Gabriel?
Yeah, well, Freddie was like that all the time. I mean, he was, he just took that onto stage with him, whereas Peter was totally different. I mean, Peter was very shy. And I think he was stuck in the Genesis music. He was stuck with a lot of places where there was no lyrics, I mean, it wasn't like he didn't. That was part of. We were all writing this music, so he was quite enthusiastic about the parts where we were instrumental, and he played flute or he played bass or whatever. But or he found himself inventing things to do, characters, costumes, that gave him something to do while people were looking at him, if you like, and while he wasn't singing. And those stories between songs developed, and that became this kind of another aspect of Genesis live, if you like, that no other person was doing. We were surprised by most of the stuff he came up with because I later learned that he just wasn't into discussing it. A committee is a good thing, but it can slow the process down quite a lot. And he wasn't in. He'd had enough of that. So he actually, when he arrived on stage and doing Supper's Ready, the Drury Lane, I think, in 73 maybe, and he came on in a black cloak and a pink luminous triangle. That was probably the first time we'd seen it as well, as well as the audience.
What did you think?
It went with the music, and it added a dramatic edge. It all worked with the music at the time. There were times later where I thought that it was. I kind of resented, if that's the right word.
But there was one where he couldn't actually sing, wasn't there?
Yeah,
he was wearing...
there's a couple of moments where he couldn't get a microphone near his throat, which hadn't been thought through, obviously. He'd worked on his own with the costume designer and the Slipperman, which is the one, it's the main culprit, the Slipperman. And he hadn't really, the guy who was designing the costume hadn't really thought that he had to sing at the same time. So he was kind of trying to get these big mounds of flesh out of the way. And it just, at that point, I thought, and also they were writing about that rather than the music. And it just started to rankle a little bit. But it never became a personal thing. It was actually, I almost felt actually that Peter agreed. I mean, maybe he didn't, because he kind of felt that his turf was being trodden on by suggesting that he was trying to steal the show on it. But it went from being something that we all kind of worked on to sort of suddenly people would come back and just talk about, oh, it's great, that costume you wore. And it was, the reviews reflected that as well.
Drummers, as we know, usually remain in a background figure and they become the subject of jokes and so on. You're a very rare example of a drummer who's come out, become the front man, become the centre of attention. Was that always the strategy?
For me?
Yeah.
Oh, God, no. I mean, it was... I was always, in a way, the band leader. In the school band I was in, I was the guy that sort of, called rehearsals, brought the songs in, tried to teach everybody what we were doing, which is only early Motown and soul songs. And but drums were that was my security blanket, that was my area. And it was when I joined Genesis. I just had no ambition to do anything. The singer was like, I didn't even care if people didn't hear the singer. It was just like, for me, it was what was going on in the music. And it was only because Peter left. And we just literally couldn't find anybody else. And when he left, I did say, could I have a go at this? Because I think I might be able to do this one. And then it worked, and then we went one by one until we'd finished the record, but we still didn't have a singer. And at that point, the rumour now has it, or legend has it in Genesis circles, that my first wife suggested that I do it, and I don't remember that. But I said, I suppose we could contemplate this idea as long as we get a really good drummer, because I don't want to be sort of thinking, oh, God, because it's a different way of listening to the music if you're not inside it like a drummer is. Anyway, so we got Bill Bruford and we went on and did it. But it's not what I wanted to do at all.
And how rock and roll was it in those days? I mean, you're never going to run for president now. How much drugs, groupies, all of that?
No, well, as far as women were concerned, I mean, everybody travelled with their girlfriends or wives, and it was terribly quiet backstage, for that reason. And in terms of drugs, I mean, it was early days. I mean, smoke a little grass or something, but it was nothing really. I mean, it just wasn't that kind of environment. You get some people join a band to go and rape and pillage their way across the world. It didn't really it wasn't what we were there for. It was music, man, the band, very Spinal Tap.
And looking back, it happened very quickly because you went within really half a decade from being a drummer to being the lead singer in Genesis to being a solo performer. But how was that planned, that progress? I mean, at what stage were you thinking, I will go solo?
Nothing is planned. I mean, nothing is planned.
I mean, this is a noticeable thing in your life, that how much of it is other people suggesting things or chance? I mean, much more than a lot of other...
Oh, it's definitely chance. I mean, with the solo thing, I was faced with a situation where the band was going to carry on doing what the band did, which was touring, making records. My marriage was breaking up, so I said, I really am going to go to... My wife went to Vancouver, which is where her family had moved to, and took the two kids, Simon and Jolie, and I said, well, I've got to go there and sort this out, and make this work. So I'll leave. And they said, no, just you go ahead and sort yourself out, and then we'll do some solo things. We've been thinking about it anyway. So I went to Vancouver with the intention of sorting it all out, and of course nothing really changed. Long story short, I came back, and they were barely halfway through their solo things. So I started to just occupy my time between the local pub, and just sort of trying to get my equipment to work, and play one, miss one, play one, miss one. And obviously the songs were about what I was feeling, but I was starting to write these things, and one was In the Air Tonight, and that's all that stuff that surfaced on the first album. It was just demos, just me playing around, just occupying my time until the band had got back together again. And then a couple of people heard the demos, people that I trusted, and they said, this is great stuff, you should put this out on a record. And so I ended up using my demos as the main tracks and adding a few friends. And then it did very well, and then suddenly I had a solo career, which wasn't the intention. I was just writing the songs for something to do.
When a song suddenly takes off in the way that In the Air Tonight did, I mean, you always wonder how much the composer knew. There are those stories of Freddie Mercury saying, I think I might have something here with Bohemian Rhapsody and all that kind of thing. But did you think this is something special?
No, I didn't at all. I mean, it's now got such a huge life, and it sort of keeps being reborn in different ways. But it was, I think, at the time of me starting to do my little demos, it was one thing I wanted to do, which it seemed very difficult for Genesis to do, because we always rehearsed and then recorded and then put the vocals on top, was that the vocals were always kind of struggling to be heard. Which, of course, like I was now being more sensitive to being the singer as well. And so I made a point on these things that I was doing, of getting vocals down quite early and then putting things around that worked, so that it was kind of stark whenever possible. And those lyrics for In the Air Tonight, I literally found a sound I liked. I got a drum machine pattern that I liked, saw the meters moving, recorded a bit, and then I sang into the, again, saw the meters moving, and that was good sign. So, and those lyrics came out spontaneously. They were improvised. But I've no idea what the song's about. And at the time, it was just another song that I was very proud of. Didn't know what to do with any of them. But it turned out that as we made the decision to make this a record, and I brought in some of my friends to play on my demos in the townhouse in Goldhawk Road, people would come down and I'd play them a couple of things. They'd say, what else have you got? And I'd play them, and then they were all like, my God, what the hell is this, And I thought, I thought it was good, I thought the rest of the stuff was good, and then it was chosen by somebody else to be the first single, and then it kind of took off. And it's, had this life. American footballers all over America warm up to it. It's like, it's the most bizarre sort of life that you just don't know exists until someone tells you.
But it came in some way out of that unhappiness of the marriage.
Oh yeah, it's an angry, bitter song. I mean, if you told me you were drowning, I would not lend a hand. Probably, it's pretty obvious. I think it's just interesting. I mean, most of the lyrics, I'd say a good 80% of the lyrics to my songs, Phil Collins songs, as opposed to Genesis songs, or as opposed to Disney songs, are improvised. The lyric, I sing lots of times. I just sing. Very rarely do I say, now, what am I going to write about? I just sing, and then I will write down what I've sung. So sometimes it's, obviously the mood of the music will affect the kind of things you write. That song had a lot of mystery and almost monotony in it, and the imagery was, that stuff, the lyrics just came out. All that album was going from the breakdown of a family to beginning of finding sort of light at the end of the tunnel.
The paint pot appearance. Now, the legend is that your wife had been unfaithful with a painter decorator, and you appeared singing this song, Top of the Pops, with a paint pot and brush. Next to you, which is clearly was a little sneer at him and her.
Well, I'll dispel the myth, but the house, while I was away on tour, the house was being redecorated, and she ended up going off with the decorator, who wasn't really a decorator. He was just a guy that was employed by the main decorator. He was a pipe and slippers guy that kind of didn't have a job, and sort of they bonded. Actually, the truth of the matter is that when I went on Top of the Pops, I was going to play the keyboard. And I asked, me and my guy Steve, who set things up, said, well, we need to put the keyboard on something, don't we? We don't have a stand, I've got to sit on a. So he said, literally, that sounds hard to believe knowing this. He said, a workmate will work. If you put a workmate out, you won't even really see it. It's a workmate. You just put the keyboard on. And, you rehearse 2 or 3 times at Top of the Pops, or we used to. And we'll put the drum machine. We'll put the drum machine on a tea-chest. Workmate, tea-chest, just that kind of works. And then at some point, I went to get a paint pot, which was just standing around.
Yeah, but this is the weird bit, this. Why, without sounding like a prosecution counsel, why, Mr. Collins, did you at this point go and get a paint pot?
Because I just thought the theme of the workmate and the tea chest the next logical thing, apart from dressing in overalls, was to put a pot of paint with the pot of paint that was there. I didn't have to go looking for it. It was just sort of floating about on the side of the stage where they were still painting the set. I just put it on there, and I promise, I swear to God, I had no. It went completely by me until.
What about your subconscious, Mr. Collins? It's possible your subconscious was thinking about.
It's
paint.
possible that certainly the subconscious was at work, but I made no conscious decision to do that. And I think it's kind of I think it's amazing that actually that I did do that, because it's obvious what it is. The lyrics I've got at home. Well, after I'd sung the lyrics, I wrote them down so as not to forget them, as it were. And the paper that I used. The other side of it is the decorator's paper, headed notebook. And I still have this piece of paper in my collection of bits and pieces that lyrics over the years and stuff. And it's my retirement plan, basically, this fun piece of paper, because it will sell for a fortune at some point to all these people that sort of love In the Air Tonight. But, there was a lot of things, I'm obviously aware of that myth, but it really, I know that that's not what I intended, but I'm sure that my subconscious was working overtime.
Why you keep your silence up? No, you don't fool me. The hurt doesn't show, but the pain still grows. Some stranger to you and me. I can feel it coming in the air tonight. Oh Lord, but I've been waiting for this moment.
Did Mrs. Collins or the decorator ever comment on this?
Yes, Mrs. Collins did, the decorator. I never spoke to the decorator, but she kind of, I don't think she mentioned it as much as what peeved her, I think, was the fact that I had made public in song what had gone on, and she was not able to do that. But that's what I do, I mean, I'm a songwriter, and people have said over the years, don't you get embarrassed by writing about your life? And that's what you're supposed to do, isn't it? I think you're supposed to be. I suppose you can be the poet that writes things like Paul Simon does, that's like hidden, and you have to go looking for it, or you write about what the truth and what's happening to you, and that's where I tend to fall.
So take a look at me now. Well, there's just an empty space. There's nothing left here to remind me. Just a memory of your face. Now take a look at me now.
And against all odds, Taylor Hackford the film director came to you for that.
Yeah, he got in touch and said, I'd like you to write a song for this film I'm doing called Against All Odds. And he told me the story. We met in Chicago. I said, well, I've never written on the road because I need my security blanket of my sounds and my little studio. I mean, I'm not exactly a professional writer, So he said, oh, that's a shame. I said, well, I got one song that I never used, actually, because I didn't actually think it was good enough for the first album. But I've got a song, and you're welcome to hear it. And if you think you like it, then I can rewrite some lyrics if you want it. And I sent him Against the Odds, which is what the song was originally called. And I did change some lyrics for him, but he was over the moon with it. And yeah, that was my first actually #1 record in America. And so people, it opened a lot of doors, obviously.
In a very short time, my duty is to take one of the finest ambassadors of the British music industry from Wembley to Philadelphia. He's gonna get himself into the record books by choppering out of here, going to Wembley, getting on Concorde, and you will see him again later in this incredible concert from Philadelphia. Ladies and gentlemen, Phil Collins!
Live Aid 1985, I was looking at the footage again. It's very weird. It's one of the very few examples of something you couldn't do now because we don't have the technology, because there's no Concorde. But even looking back at it now, it's quite a mad thing to have attempted to perform in both London and in Philadelphia.
Well, it was the way it was put to me, And Harvey Goldsmith, I think it was, said, actually, it is possible. If you wanted to do that, you could get on the Concorde and still arrive in time to play. And I remember saying to him, I said, I'm not the only one doing this, right? I mean, if there's this kind of something that joins the thing together, but I'm not the only one. And at the time, Power Station and Duran Duran had mutual members, and they both were doing each band were doing something in each country. And then one of them, that band, Power Station, bailed out, I think it was. So I ended up being the only one because I thought people would think I was showing off, you know, and that wasn't. Really, I kind of felt a bit uncomfortable with that, and turned up at the airport, and I was the only one. And in fact, Cher was on the plane, and. This is a little story, but I mean, she sort of didn't know what was going on at all, and she didn't look like Cher. And of course, all these news people came on, and she rushed to the toilet, came out looking like Cher. And I introduced myself during the flight, and she said, "What's going on?" So I said, "Well, you don't know, there's this concert today." She said, "Could you get me in? Could you get me in?" I said, "Why does everybody think I can get him in? Just ring up, you know, or just turn up." Anyway, when I got to Philadelphia I did my thing, and I was asked to do a line of "We Are the World" at the very end. You know, I said, "I don't think I can do this. No, I'm knackered." You know, but I got back to New York, turned it on to see the end of the show, and Cher was there with the microphone singing. So she'd obviously had a word with somebody and got in. But that was kind of. But that whole day was bizarre. I mean, it was just a logistical day of just, can you make it in time? It took almost as long to get from New York to Philadelphia as it did to get from London to New York.
And that whole period, Pop with a Social Conscience, it led into your own album, But Seriously.
Think twice, 'cause it's another day for you and me in paradise.
It is controversial to some people. It's ridiculous to some people, the idea of these rock multimillionaires telling people you've got to do something about the poor and the homeless.
But yeah, although if you listen to the lyric of that, shouldn't we all be, it's the thing twice, it's just another day for you and me. The idea is that we are all, I mean, I'm not asking anybody else to do anything, you know, in that song. It's actually, the song was just meant to be, we're lucky, aren't we? I mean, I'm obviously luckier than some, but we're all luckier compared to these people. I didn't see anything wrong with it, and I still don't see anything wrong with it. And I wasn't asking other people to put their money in their pockets, put their hands in their pockets. And certainly, I mean, I was doing that. You know, I mean, at every concert, I mean, a lot of the homeless shelters, Coalition for the Homeless in the States, they all got in touch and asked if they could use the song at their conferences and could they come to the concerts and collect, and we said yes, of course. And I used to say, you know, don't buy any T-shirts, don't buy, you know, at the end of the show, I don't need the money. You put the money in the buckets that, you know, and I will match whatever you put in, you know. And places that didn't get much, you know, I made the difference. So I knew I was doing my bit, but it was the actual lyrics of the song was really just you and me. It wasn't. I didn't really see it as, I didn't intend it anyway to be. Listen, all you guys should be doing it. You know, I think people just hadn't really thought the lyrics through.
Another example of things happening by chance or people suggesting things is your return to acting, because that came about in Miami Vice. Yeah. They'd use your music, they ask you to act in it. That then leads to Buster. So again, it's this thing of, it wasn't anything you drove, it was just you got back into acting.
And also Frauds, which was an Australian film, which was actually, for me, that was much better than Buster. I mean, Buster has a big soft spot in people's hearts in England, and I love doing it, but I was better in the other one. But they both came about from Miami Vice, and they both came, I mean, Miami Vice, I was very reluctant to go there and act because I'd done it as a kid, not particularly enjoyed all of it. The Oliver stuff I'd loved, but some of the other stuff I just didn't really go for. And but yeah, the films came as a result of that. And then I really had a great, you know, this was something like a breath of fresh air. I've been working with music. Suddenly there's this other thing which I didn't think I was going to enjoy, but I was suddenly very interested in. I did look at Buster not long ago, you know, and I find, you know, it's almost like a sitcom kind of film. I mean, it's very sweet, but it's I don't know, I just spoke the words that were written. I never said, do you think I should say this? Or don't you think we should make this a little bit darker or whatever? It was my first go, you know, so a lot of it is, for me, it's a little ham-fisted.
And you've never learned to read music or write music?
No.
So what do you do when you write a song?
Well, you just memorize it, really. If it's a song, for me, for example, if like when I started doing the Disney stuff, when Tarzan I was doing Tarzan, the film, I was recording everything onto tape. You know, I didn't have a computer. I mean, computers existed, music programs, but I didn't have one. I didn't have a computer for years, actually. And every time they wanted something different, I'd have to re-record it again. And then they offered me this Brother Bear, the job to do a chance to write songs for that film and do some scoring. But they said, listen, get a computer, for God's sake, because they're going to say, we're taking 5 frames out of this scene, and you're going to drive yourself nuts if you can't do that on a computer. So I had a crash course in that. And that's when I started to move on a screen, moving notes around, like with orchestral instruments. The first time I'd ever done that, really. And then when I did Tarzan the musical, I was writing for an orchestra. I mean, it was fantastic. It was a wonderful learning experience of just trying to, raise your game and learn more about the thing you're supposed to know about anyway, which is, songwriting in different areas. With the big band, when I took my big band out, that was tough because all the guys read, 20 people, and I didn't read music. Buddy Rich never read music, actually. Apparently he used to get the band to play it, and he listened, and then he would go back and play along with them. And in the end, that's kind of the journey I had to make. I had to another drummer record the stuff onto tape, and then I would listen to it. And in the end, I did have to kind of invent my own little hieroglyphic way of, if a line went that way, it was a push, If it went that way, it meant it was after the beat, If it was like a da, it would go ba, It was all, people used to come over and laugh, How do you do this? But it made sense to me. So yeah, it's been a bit of a handicap not being able to read music. But on the other hand, other parts of your senses sort of come in.
You're deaf in one ear, is that?
Kind of, mainly deaf in this ear. I mean, it doesn't affect me on stage, but if I can't hear a phone conversation, for example.
And that's rock damage, is it?
No, that's just bad luck.
Right.
That's just viral infection. And I remember when I thought it would come back. It happened one day in Los Angeles, actually, and over dinner I had Lily and me, we were sort of playing a game on TV or something, and suddenly, and it came back once that night, and then it disappeared and never came back. And I thought it would at some point, so I went to a doctor eventually, and he said, no, what you have is what we don't even know anything about it. It's called sudden deafness. And under the umbrella of hearing problems, there are many little umbrellas, and this was something they know very little about. So it's a viral infection that kills the cells on the nerve, and unless they regenerate, you don't get it back. And it's kind of assorted. It's random frequencies, so you can't amplify it because all you'll get is the same noise but louder. So it's not like a hearing loss. It's hearing frequencies that are just gone. And of course, the obvious thing is, as a drummer in rock music, for loud music for 25, 30 years, that's the reason, but it's not. It could happen to anybody. Anyway, when that happened, I just figured, okay, well, I was quite philosophical about it, actually, I must say, but I thought, okay, well, that's me sort of slow down a bit. All right, mate, all right, I will. I'll do something else. Now, what should I do? Okay, that door is closed to me. What should I do? So I was quite philosophical to sort of changing the way I was living. But slowly the brain adjusts, and then suddenly, although you still can't hear, but the perception is that you can get by. So at that point, I decided, well, would it be nice, rather than to have done your last tour without knowing it, it would be nice to go out and say goodbye properly, which is the final farewell tour in 2004. And that should have said to people, this is the end.
Well, except that partly it was seen as a joke, wasn't it? Because so many people had their very final tours.
Yeah, well, that was what the joke part of the tour was. But for me, I always put that kind of twist on it because that's the humour, But actually, it was the final farewell tour, and so we did Europe, we did America, and then Oriane got pregnant with Matthew, and it was only after Matthew was born that I went out and just did a few places in the rest of the world. And of course, the Genesis thing was another way of just saying goodbye, rather than just having had Split and nobody. Well, that's a bit of a wimp way to go out. We thought we'd go out there and just have one last crack at it.
Do you still have ambitions?
Well, I'm always interested in writing the best song, the better song than you did before. I mean, I'm sitting on a couple of things which I think are amongst the best I've written, but I'm just loath to like that Blue Touch paper, which is making a record, because I know what happens, and I'm 57, and I've got these two young kids, and I don't want to go on about it, but I've done everything I want to do, everything I know I want to do. Yes, there are things like the musical. I would like to write another musical. Yes, I wouldn't mind acting again if it came up. But at the moment, I'm just sort of small, if you know what I mean. And it occurred to me recently that the idea of killing me off is kind of it's a way that people can understand. I think it's not that I'm not proud of what I did, because I'm very proud of what I did. I just think that this, whatever I am now, is been blown up out of all proportion, and there's so many little tags that preempt your name. Something that's also, well, Mark Lawson is going to do this. I get 3 times married, veteran pop singer, faxed his wife by divorce, and there's like a series of these things now, and I just think, it's not me. So let's start again.
The first divorce really started you off as a singer-songwriter, a soloist, with those songs that came out. I mean, with this, the third one now, has this produced songs?
Well, it's produced a couple, but then I know that almost the mention of Phil's going to bring another album out. Oh, no, I don't want to hear about it anymore. It's just, so I try to steer clear of that. I've tried to steer clear over the years of actually writing the things that people actually like about me, the ballads, the sort of the... Whenever I try to sort of, I have things that interest me, and I have things that interest me less. So, and you just write and you see what happens. But if something looks like it's going to be that, I kind of put it to one side. So in some respects, I've got a couple of things which are very, very stark and very, very poignant. But I don't think the world needs another Phil Collins divorce record.
Phil Collins, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark.